My God. Oh God. 6:07 p.m. November 29th, 2023. Kissinger is dead. Henry Kissinger died today. 6:08 p.m. November 29th, 2023. CNN's been reporting it for about 7 minutes already.
Extremely controversial policy, the Christmas bombing, and at the overturning of the Allende government in Chile.
And what I'm thinking about, just Tim being here on the ground in Tel Aviv as this news is breaking, is his role here in the Middle East. I mean, in the efforts that he undertook to forge a peace, after the 1973 war, and what that looked like, and just can you talk about that influence that he had, particularly on this region in that moment?
Well, he had enormous influence. First of all, because the president of the United States was largely incapacitated during the Yom Kippur War. Nixon was dealing with the acceleration of the Watergate scandal and the start of the impeachment inquiry, and for all intents and purposes, Henry Kissinger was directing U.S. foreign policy during the Yom Kippur crisis. After the crisis, Kissinger, with Nixon's approval, of course, but Kissinger undertook the most complicated set of negotiations to establish a lasting ceasefire on both the northern border with Syria and the border with Egypt in the south. That took enormous effort and was a real diplomatic achievement on the part of Henry Kissinger. So he is remembered as a very significant figure in the history of the Middle East. And let's not also forget that he undertook very strenuous negotiations with the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese, which led to the end of the American dimension of the Vietnam Civil War. So Henry Kissinger was the most significant diplomatist of the Cold War, without exception.
Tim, I want you to stand by because I want you to continue putting this legacy in perspective. But we also have Susan Glasser, staff writer of The New Yorker. Susan, I mean, just looking at putting his legacy in perspective with how it's viewed now, I mean, this is someone who was revered and also reviled. I mean, Secretary of State, the only person to ever serve as the White House National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. I mean, how do you put his legacy in perspective to how people view it now in 2023?
Well, Caitlin, thank you so much. I mean, I would agree with you that he was a divisive figure in life, as he will now be in death, inevitably. For many liberals, really for multiple generations, Kissinger's, what they would say, the evidence of his war crimes and advising Richard Nixon and in the secret bombing of Cambodia, those things loom large, but equally so were the diplomatic achievements you were just speaking about. His enormous foreign policy vision and big brain shaped the later decades of the Cold War in a way that we are still dealing with the legacy of it. The Middle East, he basically created the notion of shuttle diplomacy and the peace process. He understood in many ways that it was the process itself that could bring a form of stability to the Middle East. His opening with Nixon to China is something that has continued to shape the contours of U.S. policy toward China. You mentioned he just went to China not that long ago after turning 100 years old and was continually a voice for engagement between great powers, including the United States, Russia, and China, despite the tensions of recent years.
Yeah, I mean, that shuttle diplomacy helping stabilize relations between Israel and its Arab neighbors. The other thing I think, Susan, that sticks out is obviously his legacy and his influence continued to endure long after he was not formally in office. I mean, the Bush administration consulted him. He spent a lot of time at the White House informally giving almost every president advice since then.
Well, that's exactly right, Caitlin. He was continued to be advising, and by the way, Democrats, many Democrats as well as Republicans, were very interested, at least privately, to hear his counsel, despite the view of many about sort of his public facing. He was speaking with Hillary Clinton. He had the current Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, I believe, attended his 100th birthday party celebration in New York earlier this year. Henry Kissinger in his late 90s was still eager to be on the inside. He went and spoke with Donald Trump when Trump was president. Kissinger was someone for whom access was something he never gave up on. He always wanted to be in the thick of things.
Susan Glasser, stand by. I want to bring in former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Martin Indyk, who joins me now, who wrote the book on Kissinger, Master of the Game. And thank you, Ambassador, for being here. I mean, what do you make of the fact that, just the fact this is happening in this moment, thinking about his relationship that he had with Golda Meir, what his influence in the region after the 1973 war? What's your reaction to learning of his death tonight?
Well, there's a real echo down 50 years from that time in Yom Kippur in 1973, when Henry Kissinger, surprised by the war, intervened actively and managed to negotiate a ceasefire after 16 days of fighting and began a process of negotiating territory for peace, which laid the foundations not only for the American-led peace process, but essentially for American domination in the Middle East and the exclusion of the Soviet Union from that area. He negotiated 3 agreements, 2 between Israel and Egypt, 1 between Israel and Syria, 2 between Israel and Egypt. Essentially took Egypt out of the conflict with Israel, which made it impossible for any other Arab state to contemplate going to war with Israel. And the Israel-Syria disengagement agreement still exists today, and the House to keep the peace on the Golan Heights. And something he said to me when I was writing the book is he was not disappointed at the fact that 50 years later that agreement still held. He was, as I wrote the book, master of the game of diplomacy. And even though his great acts of statesmanship in terms of detente with the Soviet Union and arms control, and of course the opening to China are remembered, as well as his other controversial involvement in Vietnam, Laos, places. The place where I think did the most good was in the Middle East, where he laid the foundations for peace between Israel and the United States. He never managed to deal with the Palestinian problem. They were a minor nuisance in those days, a terrorist organization, not a state, and Kissinger always dealt with states. He didn't have time for non-state actors. But I think there's a lot that we can learn from the way that he dealt successfully with the Arabs and the Israelis for the way that the United States can deal with the horrendous conflict between the Israelis and Palestinians we face today.
What are those lessons, do you think? What would he think those lessons are for the moment that we're in right now?
Well, the first, you actually saw it in Ukraine as well, is that you should always try to end the fighting as quickly as possible. That's controversial in this case because of the nature of Hamas, but that was his first instinct. Second was to try to get a negotiation going, but to be very careful about being too ambitious. I think his advice to Joe Biden today would be, it's fine to talk about a two-state solution, but it's a big mistake to try to achieve it in these circumstances. We cannot get there from here. And so his approach, which marked a lot of the way that he approached diplomacy, was incremental. He was conservative. He was Republican. He was conservative in his approach. He was deeply skeptical of the pursuit of peace because he feared that it would lead to war. He called it the paradox of peace. Instead, he felt that it was important to try to ameliorate conflict, do his best to get the sides to reduce their animosity towards each other, to find ways to live with each other, and then over time, eventually, it might be possible to reach the final peace agreement, end of conflict agreement. But in the meantime, what was important was to ensure a balance of power in favor of those who sought to maintain order, stability, and give time for everyone to come to terms with each other. For that to work, there had to be what he referred to as a modicum of justice for all sides to feel that they were getting something out of this dragged out process of coming to terms with each other. So if you think about it today, Israelis and Palestinians are so far apart, so mired in conflict. His advice would be try to find a way to end the conflict and begin small steps towards reconciliation with the ultimate goal of a two-state solution, but a very real understanding that it's going to take a long time to get there from here.
Certainly, that it's quite a legacy to reflect on, especially in this moment. Former Ambassador Martin Indyk, thank you for that. Of course, we are following this news closely. A former Secretary of State who shaped world affairs, certainly in the region that we are in right now, has now died. Henry Kissinger, at age 100. We'll have more on that ahead. Also, our major breaking story that we are following here on the ground in Tel Aviv. We are less than 3 hours away from that truce deal between Israel and Hamas expiring. Right now, there is no extension in sight. We are waiting to see what is happening in these critical talks on the ground right now. That's in a moment.
Gotta keep this in mind that when I was born, Kissinger was still trying to develop his policies, and he did help shape what the Vietnam War was. Starting to develop more traits on how to limit or stop it one way or another, helping with the negotiations between the North Vietnamese and the United States, if there was a way of getting out of it by saving face one way or another. The Vietnam, Northern Vietnam was going to take over South Vietnam. Democracy was dead. A lot of people are trying to get the hell out of there because they didn't want to be part of a communist country. In fact, every once in a great while, I think we run into situations like that regarding immigrations. So there was people that didn't exactly like him in the first place, but he was a powerful figure that they kept talking about him a great deal. All of his skills necessary to deal with foreign countries having other nationals, other sovereignties dealing with each other. You hear a little bit about it, you read something about it, but I didn't realize he had that much of a powerful influence until you see the crisis is happening all over, and here's Kissinger trying to get the peace going. Whenever the United States had an issue, call on Kissinger. So yeah, it hit me. I mean, the guy was 100 years old, but it still hit me that he had done so much, lived this long, and it was surprising to me. It was very much surprising to me, and I felt like I had my gut punched on this one. I keep expecting other elder statesmen that I grew up listening to and watching, including former presidents. One that just lost his wife. I'm expecting news about him. And that's also going to get me because of what he had accomplished. And it just, what he had accomplished even after being a president, that apparently there was not enough honors in the world for this simple great man and his wife who did so much for a lot of us. And I really had a problem concerning about this. Him losing his wife, and then they were going to be showing the motorcade. I really couldn't deal with it. And I wanted to pay honor and tribute to the president's wife. Rosalind Carter was a formidable woman, kind-hearted, determined. She and President Jimmy Carter were a team. And to see he's coming close to that point, I can just see it in him. This is going to probably help him release his own mortal coil to where he probably joins his wife. I wouldn't be surprised in the month of December that's what's going to happen. Grief will be getting to him a great deal on this one. It was one thing when both of them entered the hospice care at home. President Carter in his later years was looking so frail. He accomplished so much. In my lifetime, people thought he wouldn't be accomplishing much. But I saw a few things out of this guy that maybe history books will be talking about him being a good president, but more of a decent, better human being than some of the other schmucks I've seen. Habitat for Humanity, working with people with mental health illness. His wife and him were into that. Set up a foundation. It was not the glory or honors he was looking for. It was just basically to serve humanity. To serve, period. Because that's all he wanted to do was just serve. And apparently I'm still waiting on President Jimmy Carter to pass. To join his wife. They both deserve the eternal rest. Hearing about Kissinger, as I said before, took me by surprise. I think somewhere I had some kind of grudging respect for this man, for what he accomplished. A great deal. I just hope that he can rest as well. Anyway, I just had to get that. I mean, as soon as I saw the blurb I got from the LA Times on my screen, I'm like, okay, I got to see what the hell happened. And I mean, it's hard enough dealing with the news of Israel and Hamas trying to deal with each other, but right now they still got less than 2.5 or 2 hours maybe before the 4-day truce is over. We'll see if Hamas is ready to deal with more people released so they can get an extension on it. We'll see how Israel's going to be reacting to that one. I just, yeah.